Good morning and welcome to the November California-Nevada Drought Early Warning System Drought and Climate Outlook Webinar. Thank you for those that have joined us previously and those that may be joining us for the first time. My name is Amanda Sheffield and I am the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NIDIS in California and Nevada. This webinar is co-hosted with the California-Nevada Adaptation Program, a NOAA CAPRISA team. We've designed this bi-monthly webinar series to provide the region with timely information on current drought status and associated impacts, as well as a preview of developing climatic events. Before we get started, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and a brief summary will be available on drought.gov and our NIDIS YouTube channel later this week. We have a great set of speakers this week covering the current conditions and the outlook, and then as well as tools and resources for your winter toolbox. We typically do this theme around this time of year, and that's partly because as we're headed into winter, we want to make sure you guys have resources at your fingertips to track conditions, see what will be coming on the outlook, and things like that. Quickly before we get started, especially for those that may not be as familiar with us at NIDIS, I want to take a couple minutes to introduce us. Our mission is to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risk by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. We work to improve our understanding of how and why drought affects society, the economy, the environment, improve accessibility and dissemination and use of early warning information. We do this by working through regional drought early warning systems, including new and existing networks of federal, tribal, state, local, and academic partners to make this information accessible and usable for decision making. What does that look like? Some activities fall on activities just like the webinars, just like this, including under our communication and outreach, but we also have activities under observation and monitoring, interdisciplinary research and applications, planning and preparedness, and prediction and forecasting. The keys of the drought early warning system is that we collect and integrate information on those key integrated droughts, and as I said, make it usable, reliable, and timely as we can. A few quick announcements before we get started. For those who may be interested, the 5th National Climate Assessment, NCA5, was released on November 15th by the Biden-Harris administration and the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The Global Change Research Act of 1990 mandates that this is delivered every 4 years to the president, and so it's the newest one. At the link here on the lower right, you can find NOAA's press release on it, or you can just search NCA5 and you'll find it. And here's just an example figure from the Southwest chapter, which would cover California, Nevada. And so if you're interested in finding more, you can go to the NCA website and read the chapters and information on it. And on there, they also have events listed, including a webinar on all the different regions, on the different chapters on the regions. There's chapters on water, there's chapters on other things. And so you can find more information there if you'd like to learn more about the information pulled together in the National Climate Assessment. And I'll cover this a little bit more later because I'm going to talk a little bit about drought.gov to remind you guys what resources are there as part of the toolbox. But just wanted to mention, in case you can't stay to the end, that one of the newest features on drought.gov is an expanded historical drought tool. It provides better ways to select your regions, your county, multiple states, etc., and compare historical drought conditions over time, either through the U.S. Drought Monitor or other drought indicator tools. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass control over to our first speaker, who is Chris Malcolm. He is the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Reno, and he's going to provide us with the drought and climate update and outlook. And Chris, I will pass control right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes.
All right, show my screen. Here we go. Okay. All righty, here we go. Again, my name is Chris. I'm the meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service here in Reno, and we actually cover both states. We have counties both in Nevada and Eastern California that we do forecasts and warnings for. That's a picture that I took about a month ago, just north of Incline Village near Lake Tahoe. Those of you that know me, I do quite a bit of trail and endurance running. Well, this is one of the days where I got lost on the trail and came across this pretty amazing waterfall scene. And, you know, typically this time of year in the Sierra around Tahoe is, you know, we have the fall colors, amazing, but we typically don't have a lot of water, right? You know, it's pretty dry time of year. It's been a dry, hot summer, right? Except this year, we actually had so much, you know, moisture this summer from tropical systems and whatnot that we, you know, we ended up with quite a bit of water coming into the creeks and streams, even into the early fall. So the question is, are we in for another once in a career winter? I think a lot of us in operational meteorology are kind of tired of saying that. It seems like every year is a once in a career fill in the blank. So let's see what we got going forward here. So so far for the cool season, here's a look at our snowpack from the SNOTEL networks around California and Nevada, mainly from the NRCS. You can see a variety of above and below normal there, but in general, things are a little bit on the below normal side for late November. Of course, it's still very early in the season, and to that point, this is looking at one of the snow water content trajectory plots for kind of summarizing the Truckee, Carson, and Walker River systems on the east side of the Sierra. And the green line is normal. The shaded lines indicate the various percentiles, and the black line is where we are currently. And yes, a touch below normal, but frankly not that out of what is considered the bounds of what is considered normal. We're still kind of in the green shading, maybe some of the yellow. So a little bit of a slow start, but nothing too anomalous. And to that point, what you're seeing here on this map are for the various climate stations around the Southwest US, looking at the percentiles for precipitation accumulation since October 1st. And in general, it has been a little bit drier than normal. You see lots of browns there, especially in California. More in Nevada and the Great Basin, you're seeing percentiles that are actually pretty close to normal. We've had a few more weather systems come through the inland trajectory into the Great Basin. Even over in Salt Lake City, they're actually a touch above normal on precipitation. Actually, was taking a flight back from the East Coast on Friday, and they had a snow system move through Utah there, and that also affected parts of eastern Nevada and the Ruby Mountains as well. So there's that, and then looking at temperatures for those same stations in California. These are, again, percentiles since the mean temperature since October 1st. In general, warmer than normal. A few spots actually quite a bit warmer than normal. Look at around the Bay Area there. You see upper 90s percentiles on temperature. So specifically to that microclimate, it's been fairly notably warmer than normal. More in the Great Basin, again, a little bit closer to what you typically see for October 1st through today. We've had lots of ups and downs. We've had some warm spells, but also had some cool spells as well. So this all kind of is consistent with that snowpack plot that I showed you earlier. That mainly over into the Great Basin is kind of where we've seen a little bit more of a snow pickup, especially in the Ruby Mountains there, and some of the other Great Basin mountains around Ely and Elko. All right, so does this mean anything to the drought, what we've seen so far in the last roughly 2 months? It really very little. This is looking at the drought monitor currently, and then with the change plot since basically the start of the water year. Hardly any changes, maybe some slight improvements in just some pockets of far northern California. But overall, really the only spot that actually has like an official drought designation right now is the Clark County and southern parts of Lincoln County in southern Nevada, just kind of stubborn, holding on there, a little bit kind of a quiet monsoon period. So, but we're still way too early in the typical wet season to assess meaningful changes to drought status. We got months to go. We got a ways to go on that. I think this is kind of interesting. Here in Reno and the Great Basin, we're kind of a fire weather hotbed in a lot of years. We get a lot of dry, windy days in the summer, and we can get some dry thunderstorms during the summer. But this year, and actually last year too, it's been really quiet, and not just for us here in Reno, but across a good chunk of the Southwest US. So what you're looking at here is the number of red flag warnings. Those are for those dry, windy days, but also those dry lightning days, issued by each NWS office since the start of the year. And here across the Western US, okay, 5. Okay, what does that mean? Well, compare that to NWS New Orleans, who's actually issued more red flag warnings than most NWS offices in California and Nevada. I mean, that's a pretty shocking statistic there. Lake Charles, Louisiana, 18 versus R5. So where does this rank in kind of a historical context? Well, this is the ranking since 2006 of the number of red flag warning events for each NWS forecast office. So 1 would be a record low, 18 would be a record high. And look at this giant area across California, Nevada, Utah, up into the northern plains, where it's been a record low, record quiet season in terms of the number of red flag warnings. So Really good news from a fire standpoint. We haven't had a lot of those really big smoky days this year. No complaints on that side of things. It's actually been a really good fall for prescribed burning. We've seen a lot of prescribed burning going on in California and Nevada because the conditions are such that the ground is relatively moist. It's not been overly windy or hot or anything like that. So we've seen a lot of prescribed burns going on. All right, so let's move forward. So I know Julie's going to dive into some of these tools in more depth when we get to her section, but I want to emphasize that in operational forecasting at most NWS offices, we make heavy use of all the great plots that they, for the center western water extremes, produces for atmospheric rivers. So what you're seeing here is the probability from the ECMWF ensemble system of an atmospheric river conditions making landfall on the West Coast at various points into the future. Of course, your eyes are drawn to this giant red blob out there in around the December 3rd through December 7th period. Really high chances. That's actually, as a forecaster, when I see that, I'm like, wow, that is a really big signal, especially a week or a little bit more in advance going into the West Coast. But in terms of California, Nevada, ooh, it's like right at the goal line there. Most of the AR conditions are actually going to be more up into Oregon. This looks like a fairly wet period for Oregon, but far northern California, let's say around Eureka, Crescent City, Mount Shasta, it's going to be close enough where you're still potentially going to pick up some appreciable precip out of these systems coming next week. So this is what we call 250 units of integrated vapor transport. So it's kind of a low end threshold for what is considered an atmospheric river. Basically, you're multiplying the amount of moisture, humidity in the atmosphere times the wind speed, and it comes up with a number. And so 250 is the low threshold. So the higher the number, the more intense the atmospheric river is. So how about the probability of 500 units of this IVT? It's actually pretty decent. So this actually shows you that more up into Oregon, they're looking at some potentially moderate to maybe stronger atmospheric rivers in this sequence around the 4th, 5th, or 6th of December. But for us in California, Nevada, we're going to be really close. We're going to be looking north and like, oh man, look at all that amazing rain and snow. But we'll be close. We'll get some, especially in the northern parts of California. So to that point, let's look at the national blend of models. This is the tool that provides the foundation for all NWS forecasts right now. Basically, it takes every single model that's out there. It's like the Borg of models. It assimilates everything and distills it down into various probabilities and scenarios and things like that. So what you're seeing here is what is the best guess? If you had to pick one number, what is the best guess for total precipitation between now and next Wednesday, December 6th? And it kind of goes to show you, again, the further north you go, the heavier precipitation potential. Again, there's 4 inches or higher along the coast of Northern California next 7 to 10 days. Even some spots of 1 to 2 inches, up close to Donner Pass. But for a good chunk of California, if we do get storms, they're going to be fairly modest in nature. But even Southern California could pick up some precip there over the next week or so. The Great Basin is a little bit more hit and miss. Now let's talk about snowfall, because snowfall is what really does dictate our drought situation and our water supply for the coming year. And again, this is that best guess, picking one number out of all the different models. What is our best guess between now and next Wednesday, total snowfall accumulation? And not too bad. I mean, it looks like a lot, right? Red equals a lot, right? But in the grand scheme of things, over a 7 to 10 day period, 1 to 2 feet of snow is nice. We'll take it in the Sierra, but it's not like a major weather event. But still, this could be help to get that curve, that snow water content curve, a little bit back above normal by let's say this time next week or so. A lot of this precipitation actually comes Thursday, Friday, Saturday timeframe over the next few days. So let's look at that snowfall probabilistically. We're trying to do more of this in the Weather Service, where we're not just giving you that best guess, but we're giving you, hey, what are the odds of reaching certain thresholds? What is the worst case scenario versus best case scenario? Of course, for each person that might be different. As a runner, my worst case scenario is seeing a lot of snow. For the ski areas, their best case scenario is seeing a lot of snow. All right. So let's look at the 72-hour probability of 12 inches of snowfall. Basically, this is kind of that Thursday, Friday, Saturday time frame, and really high chances, 60, 70, 80% of seeing that 1 foot of snow in a good chunk of the Sierra, including around Tahoe and down toward Mammoth. Here's a 2 foot threshold probability for that same time frame. And look at that, 1 in 3 chance. Not too bad, along, let's say, getting close to around Donner Pass and those areas. Now, of course, this could yield significant travel headaches as well. So now let's look further out into the future here. This is the CPC week 3, week 4 outlook. And basically the message here is we're not seeing any screaming signals going into the early to mid-December weeks, but the storm door at least remains ajar. We're not seeing that dark brown shading over California, Nevada on the precip, which indicates the storm door is slammed, shut, locked, all that jazz. No, the storm door is at least ajar. So we could potentially see some additional weather events coming into the West Coast during that time frame. All right, so let's look even further out. Let's look at what the latest projections are for this coming winter. And of course, this year's big driver is a big El Nino in the Pacific. You can see that big warm anomaly in the tropical Pacific Ocean in the sea surface temperature fields. So it's basically nearly certain. I mean, we already kind of are in a strong category on what the temperature anomaly is for the El Nino condition. Pretty certain that's going to continue through the balance of winter. Honestly, there's enough simulations, about 35% of them, that do show that this could rival some of the biggest warm anomalies on record. But does that necessarily mean big warm anomaly equals big impacts for California and Nevada? No, not necessarily. So all you have to do is go back to the sort of infamous Godzilla El Nino of 2015 to know that, hey, just because it's a big El Nino doesn't mean that California is going to automatically float away in a giant flood. No, each El Nino can be a little bit different. So what is a textbook El Nino? Well, typically that is where you see the jet stream, the storm track shifted a little bit further south. So you see more storms in the southern part of California, Arizona, Nevada, and into the southern US. La Niña is where that storm track is a little bit further north, more up into the Pacific Northwest. So while it doesn't guarantee constant storms, it just indicates the frequency of storms in the southern parts of California and the Great Basin are going to be increased over a typical winter. At least that's the textbook definition of El Nino. So what do the models actually show for December, January, February? We're going to go through each of the individual models that the CPC forecasters look at and see what's going on here. So for each of these, the greens and blues are wet, the yellows, reds, and browns are dry. Not a surprise there. So here's one model that shows a reasonably wet signal. Here's one that shows, oh boy, that's a really wet signal for California, Nevada. Here's one that's slightly wet. Here's one that's slightly wet. Here's another big one for another big wet signal there. Here's kind of a split the difference, a little bit wet in the south, a little bit dry in the north. This is the only one of the 8 here that actually shows a dry signal for the coming winter. So that's a little nugget there. And then here's one that's kind of basically near normal. So again, most of these models are tipping in that wetter than normal direction for December, January, and February in California and into Nevada. Now, what historically have past strong El Ninos done? This is a scatter plot. I love using these from the Western Region Climate Center. The top one is for the Northwest Nevada division, and the bottom one is for the Southern California division. So basically looking at El Ninos in red, La Niñas in blue, and the neutral winters in green, compared to precip in the October through March period. And so as a whole, especially in like northern Nevada, I mean, it's like you're going out to the gun range with a shotgun, and you're creating that perfect scatter there almost across the board. Whereas for Southern California, there's a little bit of a tilt toward drier conditions in La Niñas and wetter conditions in El Niños. That goes with the textbook definition. But how about those strong ones, those really anomalous ones, the ones furthest to the left? There's a little bit of a tilt again toward the wetter than normal outcome here, and some really wet El Niños in Southern California. But it's only a few data points, and there's one here that actually was fairly typical or even drier than normal. So again, not a lock, but it does kind of lean the direction in that little bit wetter than normal outcome. So using all this information, to kind of use a Nevada analogy. You got your dice, right? And you're rolling them. The dice are a little bit loaded toward that wetter than normal outcome, but you could, of course, still roll a dry scenario or an average scenario, but they're just a little loaded toward rolling that wetter than normal outcome based on the data that we're seeing. And to that point, this is some great maps from our friend up in Alaska here, Brian. He's produces these maps showing the moderate to strong El Ninos. What does the snowfall do? Well, actually, for the Sierra and the Great Basin, there is a slight tilt toward a snowier than average outcome for a good chunk of the area. Now, it's a slight tilt. It's not like we're seeing in West Texas here, where it's like pretty much game on. You're going to have a snowy winter, but it is an interesting data point that we'll have to watch going into this scenario. And to that point, these are some data. This is going into the big El Nino in 2015 from the Central Sierra Snow Lab up at Donner Pass. What have the strong El Niños done for snowfall? Those are the red bars there, and you can see there's a few of them that are really, really snowy, but there's also a couple of them that were outliers below normal. So again, kind of there's that lean maybe toward a snowier than normal, but not a guarantee at this point. So what is the best guess going into the winter of 23-24? Well, you could just ask me, and I'll give you one of my world famous briefings on the rotary phone with the 8-ball there. Usually it'll be asked again later, but that all being said, here's when you average all those models that I showed you a few slides ago. This is what it is a lean toward that wetter than normal outcome, that light shade of green there, kind of that first threshold probability for above normal precip for most of California and Nevada. And so that the latest CPC outlook does factor that in on going with that above normal, but it's only the first category or two, so it's a lean above normal. It's not likely, it's not definite. We're not the Southeast U.S. here. Look at this. It's almost guaranteed that they're going to see a wetter than normal winter in the Southeast U.S. So we're in that lean direction. The temperatures are showing above normal. They're leaning above normal. I think those can be more hit and miss, especially in the Great Basin with our topography. You can get cold air that gets trapped in these mountainous valleys here. So, that one maybe is a little more tenuous, but kind of leaning above normal on the precip. And there's your pie chart format if you like that. You can kind of go to your dice analogy there. You got about a 1 in 5 chance of rolling that drier than normal winter, but a 4 in 5 chance of getting an at or above normal on precip for this winter. So the bottom line, and I'll wrap up here, I think we still need to consider any scenario on the table at this juncture, but be prepared for another wet, snowy winter. I know we had a lot of impacts last winter, from flooding to crushing weights of snow in the Sierra that impacted communities. We've seen this before. We've had cycles of wet years. The 80s and mid 90s were one of them. So, it is certainly possible. October and November, we're on the drier end of the spectrum, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to stay dry the rest of winter, or we're going to just suddenly shift to wet for the rest of winter. There really aren't any correlations to how winter starts versus how the rest of winter will go. We do have, in general, in most areas, soils are wetter, lakes are fuller, streams have more water in them. So if we do have a warm, big atmospheric river, I think we need to be a little bit on higher alert for flooding impacts maybe earlier in the season than we typically would. On the flip side, while it's not a big concern right now, if we end up with a prolonged dry and warm stretch, I think we know that fire season really isn't a season anymore. It's kind of a year-round thing in California and Nevada, so just be mindful of that. And I'll finish with this. This is from above Reno, Hidden Valley, wild horses. I was doing training around up the hills, and horse friends were cheering me on heading up the hill. So that's what I got.
Great, thanks, Chris. I always love your photos because you said you get up in places maybe people don't get up to as often as you do. With that, I'm going to pass over to Julie, who's going to start our toolbox presentations. This is just a reminder for folks to pop your questions in the question box. We'll do most of them at the end, unless I catch one here and there in between speakers. Julie, here you go. And Chris, someone just commented, thanks for making the forecast fun.
I totally agree with that comment. I enjoyed it very much, Chris. Thank you. We're seeing the right screen, correct?
Yes, we see the CW3 website.
Great. So I'm actually not going to be talking from a presentation today, but actually the website. This is the home page, so it's just cw3e.ucsd.edu. And really what I wanted to bring your attention to is this forecast tab. I have a bunch of tabs open on top because it takes a little bit longer to load, but everything that I will be talking about is a drop down from this forecast tab from the original homepage. So first I'm going to go to the landfall tool. I won't emphasize this too much because Chris did an amazing job explaining it, but I just want to show that this is where it is, and you have to scroll down. I'm scrolling back up, but this is when you first go to the forecast page, you can see maps of, this is integrated water vapor, so it's how much water is in the atmosphere, and this is the integrated water vapor transport, which Chris explained is the water vapor and the winds together, which is an indication for an atmospheric river and how we measure them. And then if you keep scrolling down here, you'll see the landfall tool, and you can actually pick between different models. The US national model, the GEFS, is actually didn't update this morning, so I'm showing the ECMWF. You can actually see a West Wharf ensemble, which doesn't go out as far, but it has 200 members, and so you can see them, it's showing it as well. And you can go back to, you can also change the location too, where you can move it farther inland as it goes out. The other thing I wanted to bring your attention to, this is a plume diagram. And so this is a little bit more location specific. And so as you can see, Chris mentioned the storm that's coming, or the atmospheric river that's forecasted for next week is much a bit farther north. So this is in the Oregon area. And so at 45 north, so you see it. And each of these lines is one ensemble member. So if you can think about it as one individual forecast, but then when you put it all together, you get a sense of the uncertainty. And I will say that's one thing at CW3 we really tried to work on, is characterizing that uncertainty in the forecast to get a better sense of how certain is it, you know, whether the atmospheric river might be a bit farther north or a bit farther south. Or and so here you can see a whole bunch of different ensemble members and getting a sense of the uncertainty. And there is quite a bit of uncertainty. You know, it might barely be an atmospheric river, or it might be a moderate one. And the next thing I will talk about is the atmospheric river scale. And so you can actually, and I will put some links in the chat, you can actually sign up for atmospheric river scale alerts. This is something that our director actually worked on with Chris and others to develop the scale for atmospheric rivers. And it's an indication of how beneficial versus how hazardous they may be. And if you go here, you can look at, you know, what's happened in the observed record versus what's coming out in the forecast. And these green, or these gray lines are an indication that the atmospheric river either wasn't strong enough or long enough to indicate that it fell onto the scale. And then, but again, at 45 north, you can see this AR3. AR3 is potentially beneficial or hazardous, depending on, you know, prior conditions, if it's coming on the back of another atmospheric river or one back to back. And you can see here how it is laid out. And another one, going again to this ensemble idea where you see the probability of it, you can see how each of the different, one of those weather model ensemble members, so those weather forecasts, how they stack up and what the probability is. And so the ensemble mean is showing the AR3, but if you look at each of the various different members, you can see, you know, there's about 5% that are indicating the AR4, about another 20% the AR3, and then the 2 and 1. And then here you can see by each of those members, the durate Y, for example, this, the AR4 is it's forecasting much longer duration than the other one. So again, this is just giving more information about what may be coming in terms of both strength and duration. And similarly to the landfall map, you can change your location, so it's either further along the coast or more inland. And then you can also change your location, how far north and south it is. So for example, you know, if as we drop a bit farther south, there's an indication that it won't be quite as strong, so it's an AR2 versus an AR3. So there is, and you can switch between various different models as well. Another tool that is on the website, it's called the watershed precipitation. And so you can click by watershed, and you get a whole bunch of different forecast precipitation information. And so this is the mean aerial precip, so the total precipitation over that watershed. Over 10 days, one of them 7 days, but you can see how long, and you can see how much it varies between the different operational models. So for the US national model, for example, here for the watershed here, it's showing 6.3 inches versus The European model is showing 4.19. And then what you can see here is how it's broken out day by day and the differences between those models. And so it gives a sense of when it might be coming, and again, that uncertainty between the various models. And then you can dig in a bunch deeper and you can see, you know, here's a graphic representation of the accumulated precip over that watershed. Also here you can see the precipitation by, I think it's 6-hourly increments generally for the watershed, and what that precipitation total would be. Now I'm going to jump to some of the subseasonal forecasts. So we have a couple of different subseasonal forecasts on the website. And by subseasonal, I'm talking week 2 to week 3, and I'm really going to focus on the week 3 to 4 forecast. And so this is looking at atmospheric river activity. And in that, here you can see week 1, which is more on the weather time scale, but week 2 and week 3. And this is for a Canadian model. And what is this probability of AR occurrence over, you know, various different locations over California and Nevada. And then here goes into week 3, whereas this is the forecasted number of AR days. This is what the climatology would be, and this is a difference. So this gives you a sense of how different it may be than the historical climatology. And so what you see here is that, you know, the Pacific Northwest and northern part of California has a bit higher than climatology probability of atmospheric river conditions. And then you can also switch between models, because especially this far out, the more information you have of multiple models, it really helps provide some clarity of, or a little bit more certainty. If they're all showing different things, it's an indication that the models are still pretty uncertain. And so when you switch models, here again, looking at week 3, in particular, you can see that the NCEMT model, the US model, is showing more certainty for higher atmospheric river conditions, or higher frequency of atmospheric conditions in week 3 throughout, you know, the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. The other thing I wanted to highlight are these ridging forecasts. And so this is almost an indication of the opposite side of the precipitation. And so this uses a US model as well. And it uses many different members of that model. And it's indicating, you know, what ridge type it may be. And of that ridge type, what is the precipitation associated with it? And so right now I'm showing week 3 and 4. And so there's about 62% of the ensemble members that have some agreement here, and then another 56 some agreement here. And so it's showing that there is some uncertainty, but there is likely some bridging. What that means for the Pacific Northwest, obviously it's uncertain, but, you know, central to, you know, maybe parts of Southern California are indication of drier conditions. You can also choose weeks 1 and 2, see full update, or also weeks 5 and 6, and look at it there. The second to last thing I will highlight, is this odds of reaching 100% normal water year precipitation. And so this isn't actually a forecast at all, but it's looking at how much precipitation have we received thus far. And based on that, considering many, many years, what are the odds that we'll receive that normal amount of precipitation? It's something that Mike Denninger has put together. And in November, because we have so much of the water year left to go, it doesn't show as much, right? It's showing that we, for some places, because the odds are still are somewhat low. But as you get into December and January, this is a really good indication of what are those odds. And given that we live in such a highly variable climate, like, it's not a certainty, but it gives a sense and provides some context of really what those odds are of reaching normal precipitation. Oftentimes we'll use this in the drought status update, but if you wanted to find it yourself, that's where it is. And the last 2 things I will say is that the center provides what we call AR updates and outlooks. And so they're forecasts that are focused on atmospheric rivers and some other major precipitations events over California and Nevada. And so you can see there's explanations about it, a lot of the forecast graphics talking about the different atmospheric rivers that are coming. It describes some of the forecast products. Here's a landfall tool. And so it takes a lot of the forecast products on the website and helps interpret them for you. And I will put a link in the chat afterwards if you want to sign up for an alert of when a new Outlook is published. Something we started last year that we'll continue to do this year is also do sub-seasonal outlooks. And the idea is putting together the multiple different products that we have on the website to provide, if there's more confidence or less confidence in whether it will be dry or wet in week 2 or week 3. And it explains why, the reasoning behind that, and also goes into multiple subseasonal forecast products, as well as the MJO, which is a teleconnection that can impact subseasonal predictability. So I will actually stop there. I'll put a couple of the links in chat if you would like to sign up for any of the alerts. And at the end, I would be happy to take questions. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Julie. While I'm passing over to Alicia, this is a quick one. Excuse me. They were particularly on the watershed precip site, and they said it was taking a long time to respond. Do you guys know, is there a specific browser to use for these?
No, it's a lot of data. It does take a long time to respond. We're actually working on, for next water year, website update that will help with some of this. We know it's an issue. It is just a lot of data is part of the problem.
Great, thanks. With that, I'll pass it over to Lisa, who's with the U.S. Geologic Survey in the Southwest region.
Thank you, Julie. That was great to see all that interactivity on all of your maps and such. Are you seeing my correct screen and hearing me?
Yes, I am.
Great, cool. So I'm here to talk about the USGS drought science and the collaboration portal that's going to be unveiled in Las Vegas at the annual Colorado River Water Users Association conference in a couple of weeks. My name is Alicia Torregrosa, and I'm the program officer with the Southwest region. And the region oversees the water science centers for California, Nevada, and Arizona, as well as the ecosystem, coastal marine, earthquake, geology, minerals, and geophysics center. And you're looking at a slide of the National Water Dashboard of NWIS, the National Water Information System, and it's showing the site locations of stream gauges and groundwater monitoring sites. A cool tool, one of many from the Water Mission area. Another tool is an old favorite, the Water Watch, that you can sign up and get alerts on real time. And then there's also, of course, the newer tools like the webcam views from the stream gauges. So the drought prediction program, and if you have any questions about this program, you can reach out to the points of contact, Eric Smith, the program lead, and John Hammond and Stacy Archfield, who are leads for a couple projects that I want to call your attention to. The first one is the data-driven drought predictions that John Hammond is heading up. That's developing machine learning, tree-based and neural network models to forecast stream flow, drought percentiles, drought likelihood, and drought duration likelihood. First for the Colorado River Basin, and then eventually across the United States. The draft model's been completed for the basin, and with forecasts at 7, 14, 30, 60, 90 days for about 350 gauge locations. So stay tuned for more about that one. Stacy Archfield is leading the other project, Simulating Drought Risks. It ties together the forecasts from John's project with 2 other projects, EcoFlows and Socioeconomic Drivers. Her goal is to demonstrate societal and ecological vulnerability to drought and quantify the risk to water security under drought conditions. The goal is to provide a prototype for an integrated product that allows users to prioritize which factor or combination are important to their risk and then spatially identify where that is. I also want to highlight a couple of really cool new data visualizations that we consider tools because they're very illustrative. The stream flow drought explanation, it's a whole website that you explore and go through. And then the analysis of droughts over time. This is looking at 5 different droughts and their impact on society. And this impact on society is a really important aspect that I'm going to come back to a little bit later. And it's not just the water mission areas that are engaged in drought research. Here at USGS, the ecosystems mission area and other mission areas are also moving research forward. And I'm just showing the ecological drought research that is high on the ecosystems list. And, you know, these disciplinary approaches to drought maybe are the most familiar paths for people to be engaged with USGS science and data, but it's really part of a new integration that we've been really moving more towards as we integrate different subject matter experts together. Some folks get really overwhelmed with the richness of USGS drought data. Just for the Colorado River Basin, there's thousands of products. You know, we know that word of mouth is really a powerful way to share information, but in this digital age, we really need to look at the landscape as an integrated whole and see these leverage points to be able to gain insights that aren't really available from one disciplinary perspective or specific use. And so that's where the science partnerships and the different activities that the Actionable and Strategic Integrated Science and Technology Initiative, also known as ASSIST, has been leaning into this interactive, interdisciplinary, and participatory approach to science. And that's been happening over these last 3 years. Some of the ASSIST approaches have been applied to other major challenges. The schematic on the right is what participants of the Saline Lakes Water Availability Assessment arrived at. There's currently an ASSIST effort with the Mined Lands Decision Support Tool and the Sagebrush Restoration Modeling the PRESET is the acronym for that. So I want to move more into what ASSIST is doing now and sort of the ongoing effort that has come out of all of these activities that I've been showing up to date, and the science co-development collaboration with partners that we're weaving together sort of the science and knowledge on the landscape, and how this has led to the collaboration portal that we're really focusing on two-way communication, which is putting that up to scale is really a challenge, but it's something that really came out of the partnerships that we've been having. And as a result of these partnerships, the core group has built relationships that's facilitated very high levels of participation. And it culminated recently in a 3-week co-development workshop last spring with representatives from everyone that you see on this, from folks from these different organizations that you see here on the slide. It was a very structured, collaborative framework, but on top of this structure, it was designed with a very open-ended opportunities for feedback. And one of the outcomes from this 3-week effort with partners was a list of high priority science questions that are ready for co-design into seed projects, seed science projects. Another outcome from this effort was a strong across the board from a majority of folks for a central access point to drought data and science. And the participants also described and expanded on what they would find most useful in such a portal. And these became the requirements with which the portal that I'm about to show you more of was designed. So as I said, the collaboration portal is going to go live on December 13th in Las Vegas at the CRUA conference. And it's designed to be continuously evolving based on the needs of each of the communities that form within the hub. The hub is a platform that is feature rich for that kind of two-way communication. And the architects are using the hub platform to manage the groups and allow for secure access. And this is going to be especially important for some of the tribal communities that are going to be some of the first collaborators that are testing out this governance of membership and the collaborative structure that we're going to be unfolding. And the initial content is, again, very responsive to the high priority requests from the spring workshop participants. One of the big questions was, how does water year 2023 compare to drought conditions observed? And what USGS science has been done in my state or in my area or in my area of interest, and how can I get help to understand what these data and what these drought conditions mean, what the impacts are, especially the cascading impacts. And then the third was really a desire to be able to connect with scientists and work with tribes and indigenous people to understand drought and drought science impacts. So the question about water year and the cascading is a beautiful, I think, story. It's a geo-narrative that links to many of the sites actually that we've been seeing today, because this portal is linking to other portals, but also creating interpretations of these data so that there's a further data visualization and understanding of what these data mean and how to move through all of these. There's also geospatial referencing to projects, and this is where we're really interested in collecting and linking to others that are working throughout, and the scaling of this to other watersheds is something that we're hoping to do as we all move forward. And then this third piece is that two-way communication of creating these communities within this managed, secure platform, so that questions and considerations of science and science interpretation can be happening sort of as a peer review or open science collaborative effort. So I'm going to put this list in the chat so that if you have a story and a science need, that you would be able to also participate and help us evolve this effort. And with that, I just want to thank the ASSIST team, the Actionable and Strategic Integrated Science and Technology team, and note that it's the largest group. And thank you. And I'll put some of these URLs in the list there.
Great. I was going to say about that's the one question we got was, what does ASSIST stand for, what you have on the slide again, and some of the links I think that you've been sharing. So I'll make sure to grab those as well for the post-webinar write-up for folks and anyone else that what they've been sharing. So that way, when we send that out, you'll have a bolded list. All the listeners have a bolded list of a lot of these things to go check them out later on.
Thank you.
So that just, yep. So that just leaves me as the last presenter real quick before we take on some questions, because we're definitely getting some questions in. Let me change sharing real quick to me. Go. I'm just quickly going to remind some folks, because there's obviously a lot of resources we weren't able to show today or showcase today. There's so many out there, which is great to have, but always having them all in one place to sort of tell you where to go would be useful. And it's just a part of the reason what we try to do with drought.gov. So first I just want to show you a couple updates, but also then remind you where you can find a lot of the specific information, including from USGS or for California, the state, or Nevada, the state, and things like that. First, just a reminder that drought.gov, which is NIDIS curates, is the US drought portal. We do have drought conditions for city and county level and some global information. We have newer interactive and customizable maps and data that show drought in new ways. I'll talk about our new revamped historical drought tool, which now you can look at drought data up to 2,000 years. We've got timely update on drought information, including drought status updates and drought alerts. And a lot of the information that say if you wanted to go learn, research and learn on information, say go quote back to the basics, we have a lot of that information on the website as well. I'll go through a few slides here, then I'll just hop to the slot to drought.gov itself to go through a couple of things. Maybe I'll skip here for time. It was just a reminder of some of the things that we have on drought.gov. I think I'll go into those later. But as I said, one of the newer features is that's recently updated is the historical conditions tool. This allows users to compare 3 historical drought data sets side by side on an interactive map and time series, which includes the US Drought Monitor, the 9-month SPI, and paleoclimate data. Now you can go into the tool and view data by state or county or any custom region that you select. It comes out with a time series that you can hover on for statistics to easily compare drought conditions over time. It has an interactive legend to view context for what each is. This drought wet? Is it a drought? Has it been a drought or has it been a wet category? And similar to many other tools on drought.gov, you can download then whatever information you're finding under high quality images or data files as well. This is just a little more detail. You can choose data layers. As I said, you can load in state or county, time series information. You can combine states and counties to get those unique regions, whatever you may be looking at. There's more information about this data set, and you can also then download an image or a CSV, XML, or JSON file. I'll go to specifically the California, Nevada states pages right after this, so you can see what kind of information is there. But just a reminder, these are the one-stop shop for some of this information. Here I just have some examples, but there's a lot more of the Nevada stream flow conditions, Nevada soil moisture conditions. They have a lot of the actual data themselves, then about that information, updates. Then we have collected also types of statistics on each page, including the disaster designations. If they were in drought, the number of residents that are in drought, some recent climatology facts, and things like that on each state page. This is what I was mentioning, that every map on drought.gov now has, you can click a button and be able to play with that figure and toggle between what types of map you want, zooming in on the data, data layer and transparencies, what you may want in the background for state lines, county lines. You can overlay the US Drought Monitor maps or other geographic boundaries, including federal recognized tribal nation lines. And as I said, download a high quality image of that. And every map on drought.gov, I believe, is able to do this now. Our hope was to ease people who have to pop these into presentations or may not look at this data a ton to be able to grab graphics for different drought information. With that, I'm just going to pop over to the website. Here, hopefully it pops up, is drought.gov itself. From here is where you would navigate to a lot of this information. You can find data, so current conditions, drought impacts. This historical information I showed is right here, outlooks and forecasts, and then you can browse by topics where we've curated information on agriculture, paleoclimate, snow drought, water supply, public health, fire, soil moisture, vegetation. And from there, we also break things down by sector where we've curated the information there. You then can go into by location, which includes a bunch of different scales and our drought early warning systems. Research and Learn has a lot of background information on different types of drought, other information. And then About is about NIDIS, and then News and Events. You can find things like webinars like this under upcoming events, and you'll find our past webinars under past webinar events, things like that. Just to show you the historical drought tool I mentioned, this is one of our biggest, newest updates. So you go to Data and Maps Historical Information, and there you can start, it has facts about those states that you select. Here I selected California, Nevada. This is different drought coverage from the Standard Precipitation Index. And there's information here how you can go through and update the graph, combine states, combine counties, download the image, download a spreadsheet, all things like that. Instead, if you want, I wanted to make sure I showed the state pages. So if you go to by location and click state, there you can click on California or Nevada. It'll take you to a page that has state specific information, including the statistics I mentioned, as well as the current drought map, drought changes, drought blends and things. Then down here is where all those things we couldn't talk about today, where you'll find all the state drought websites, the state drought agencies, the California Water Plan, things like that. Again, more data that you can look at and play with. And down at the bottom, which I think you'll find interesting, a lot more resources to other groups that are working on drought, including your regional drought, your regional climate centers, your state climatologist, the California Data Exchange Center is here. All the National Weather Service offices are here. We have websites on the USDA, things like that. So a lot of those groups we couldn't have time to feature today, but you may want to find more information on them and their resources and tools. The quickest way is to go to the California or similarly the Nevada, let's see, once this loads, the Nevada state page as well, because we have one of these for every state in the country. With that, I'll wrap up quickly, just reminding that in the next few weeks, since there's not currently a lot of drought in California and Nevada, we haven't been releasing quite so many drought status updates, which are where we sort of culminate all this information together on the current conditions, as well as impacts we're hearing and things like that. But we will be launching our snow drought updates. So under data and maps, you can find snow drought information. These are written for the whole West wide together, but you'll find linked on the snow drought page. And if you want to sign up for the emails, you will get snow drought updates starting on December 6th, I believe is going to be our first one. And we do those every month after following in the season. So we'll give you an update. If we don't start doing the California Nevada drought status updates due to conditions, we'll at least have snow drought information and how snowpack is going throughout the season there. So you might want to keep an eye out for those. And last thing I'll mention is, as we had a great presentation on USGS from Alicia, so many different organizations on our website, you can find these partner cards. So you can find everything that at least that drought.gov has that's linked to USGS products. And each of these then take you to more information and then take you to the product themselves. So you can find these for USGS, you can find these for the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, CW3 that Julie talked about. You can find them for National Weather Service and all kinds of other partners to see what all the data may be available for that partner if you're not as familiar with them. With that, I'll go ahead and stop and pop over to some questions. I'm going to go back to the beginning even. So Chris, there were a few there for you. Let me get the right slide up so people know where the next webinar is. Let me go to questions. Some of these, Chris, the very early ones are very specific to I think what you were talking about. So someone was saying, hey, for example, how do you anticipate the snow level getting on the east slopes of the Sierra on Friday?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, now we're getting into the site-specific forecast. It's definitely not going to be a warm storm. This is not a big atmospheric river by any stretch. That's for next week. So the rain snow lines on Friday, you know, honestly could get down to 4,000 feet or so. There is a chance of seeing some snow down into the Reno area on Friday morning. I think that's kind of our message is for anybody traveling on Friday, is that Friday morning commute is probably the one to watch up here in Reno, Tahoe.
And this was a little more broader. At what point in the year would be a likely time you'll know how extensive El Nino's impact will be?
The flippant answer to that is I'll tell you in April or May how El Nino's impact is going to be. But the honest answer is, you know, once we get to around New Year's, you know, we're going to have a sense of how winter's going. You know, generally, you know, if it's been a really volatile, stormy period, like, okay, you know, it's looking like it'll trend that way. Honestly, we've seen winters though where it was really busy in December and then the atmosphere just shut down. That was a couple of years ago, and then the rest of winter was bone dry. So I'll be honest, the predictability isn't all that good. One example is for water supply forecasting. So this is taking all the snow melt, the snowpack, and melting it out, all the models that are used from the River Forecast Center to do that. Generally around mid-February is where the reliability of those improves enough where they can be useful guidance for water managers. So there's just an example of kind of when we might know what, you know, the impacts of this potential winter. Yeah.
And then this is sort of a quick, I'm going to say the two parts because this is from someone I think from the Bay Area, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer, Chris, but their first question was, is there anything to the North Bay receiving the brunt of the San Francisco Bay Area storm precip recently? And then their second question is, has NOAA increased the amount of study of wind in relation to storms since it has such an impact on disasters in the Bay Area? I don't know if you can
Yeah, no, definitely good question. Yeah, so that the storm that rolled through, it just was the storm track, you know, such that the north part of the Bay Area got the brunt of the storm. You know, we see this fairly frequently where we have really tight north to south gradients in precipitation and impacts. It just happened that this storm, you know, kind of stopped where you know, the north part of the bay got more of the storm. You know, in terms of wind impacts, you know, the models are getting better and better at being able to predict the wind impacts, especially within about 24 to 48 hours. That's when we get into our high resolution modeling, let's say down to 3 kilometer resolution. And we're going to be able to tell you, okay, this is going to be something potentially historic, or it's just going to be your average wind with a storm. You know, beyond 48 hours, it's really still tough to predict, you know, the wind impacts with any degree of accuracy. Yeah.
Great. With that, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to stop on questions. A lot of these I think were for websites or some more information, so I can follow up with some of these folks afterwards. With that, I just want to say thank you all for joining us today, and to all our great speakers, for Chris, Julie, and Alicia. We hope people found this webinar informative. If you didn't, there is a survey at the end, or you're feel free to contact me by email. I'll mention again that the recording with a brief summary from this webinar will be available on drought.gov later this week, and you'll probably get an email about that. And then, as I mentioned, if you have any information you want shared on these webinars, questions, etc., I want to get more involved with the drought early warning system, feel free to contact me or fill out the survey that comes out after the webinar. With that, I'll go ahead and close and say thanks, everyone, and I hope everyone has a great post-Thanksgiving week.